Mark promised not just to buy our company, but to invest a minimum of $1 billion a year. In the end, Mark didn't acquire me. I acquired them. Okay, Meta, when was Palmer Luckey fired? And he goes, boop, boop. Palmer Luckey was fired on March 29th, 2017, after being found guilty of, why did you fire Palmer Luckey? And he said, I don't think this is an appropriate forum. He said, you have to answer the question. I think Mark was truly convinced that VR was the future. He saw what we were doing and he said, oh my God, this is the future of computing. This is the future of gaming. I truly believe in your vision. I want you to be a part of Facebook. So, we're not really that interested at this point, but like maybe we could team up in some way. And the thing that really convinced us in the end was two things. One, Mark promised not just to buy our company, but to invest a minimum of $1 billion a year into research and development for the next decade. Mark changed the name of the company to Meta and literally made AR and VR the core of the company. Like in the end, Mark didn't acquire me. I acquired them.
It's a damn good point. So how long? So Facebook bought it.
Yep.
You moved over. How was it working at Facebook?
Things were going great. I mean, we had a bunch of metrics that we needed to hit in terms of sales, user retention. Like we needed to get 10 million users on the Oculus platform. We needed to hit, I forget, it was some number of millions of hours of monthly users. And we had these different levels where we basically got bonuses paid out on the basis of our performance tied to those metrics. We had something like 5 years to hit the top benchmark of 10 million users. We did it in less than 2 years. Like,
wow.
We were kicking ass.
Wow.
And so everything was going great. I earned all my bonuses. I got great performance reviews. Everyone loved me. And I got along pretty well with everybody, despite moving to the Bay Area, which was a very, very politically left place at the time. I'll say, like, I've long been a libertarian-minded person. Politics were always something I had thought about, but really didn't do anything about. Like I had given $40 to Gary Johnson, right? Like I don't want to say politics weren't important to me, but they just weren't that important to me. I cared about VR. I was the VR guy, right? And so here I am. I've sold my company for billions of dollars. Few years pass. And all of a sudden, Donald Trump's running for president. Now, Donald Trump is somebody who I had long had respect for. I actually wrote a letter to him when I was in college and 15 years old, telling him that he should run for president. You might not remember this, but he had been on TV and they were asking if he was going to run against Barack Obama. And he said, well, I might have no choice. I might have to run. I don't want to run. No, nobody wants me to run, it feels like, but if I have to do it, then I have to do it. If people tell me that I have to run, then maybe I have to do it. And so I wrote him a letter. I said, you have to run. We need someone who's signed both sides of a check. We need someone who is not a part of this giant government bureaucracy. We need someone who understands what it's like to build a business, not to be a community organizer. And I wrote that letter. I don't even want to say like I thought too much of it, right? I did it on an impulse because I saw him say, if enough people tell me I have to run, then maybe I'll do it. Years pass. Trump's running for president. And I said, this is fantastic. I'm so stoked that Donald Trump is finally running for president.
Did you get a response?
No, and I never got a response.
Okay.
Which is fine. Like yeah. I don't want to act like I was like put off by it. I'm so glad I did this. I posted on Facebook about it too. And I said, I said, it looks like Donald Trump might run for president. We can convince him. This would be awesome. I'm so glad I did that because now I have proof that I supported him when I was 15 years old, all those years ago. Because otherwise, this would just be like a ridiculous story. You'd never be able to prove it. When I had Trump at my house years later for a fundraiser, which by the way was the biggest presidential fundraiser for a Republican that had ever been held. I put that little Facebook post up on the screen before he came up. Anyway, so look, Trump's running for president. Everyone in Silicon Valley was losing their mind. Right? I mean, I know you probably remember, but there's probably people listening who don't remember or they're too young to remember. 2015 and 2016 was insane. The media hated Trump. Everything was being twisted in these absurd ways. You remember when he said, they're sending us their drugs, their criminals, their rapists, and they said, Trump says that Mexicans are rapists.
Yeah.
And their quote is, they are rapists. It's like, you can literally just watch what he says, and it doesn't even make grammatical sense for that construct. Also, he's literally talking about the criminals and the drugs and the murderers and the rapists. And I mean, it was insane. There was no ethics being used. It was a pure attack blitzkrieg by the media against Trump, and a lot of people fell for it. And so I ended up giving $9,000 to a pro-Trump, anti-Clinton group. And it's so funny because this started a media shitstorm that I'll get into in a moment, but I have to tell you what they actually did. I gave them $9,000. They ran one single billboard in Ohio, I think in Columbus, Ohio, that was a picture of Hillary Clinton, and it said, "Too big to jail." And this was after she got away with mishandling classified information. You might remember at exactly the same time, you had US submariners being put in prison for decades for much less expansive mishandling of classified information. It was an obvious double standard. You have the deep State Department apparatus protecting Hillary, and on the other side, you have a serviceman going to prison for something that was not nearly as bad as anything she was. So too big to jail. So would you agree? Like, that's pretty reasonable political discourse, right? That's not crazy. I'm not saying Hillary's a bitch. Like, it's very reasonable. So two things happened. First, the media found out about my contribution, and a few media outlets reported on it somewhat accurately. Like Palmer Luckey, the guy who started Oculus, this Facebook executive, has given $9,000 to this pro-Trump, anti-Clinton group that's running a billboard. Then a handful of people on Twitter, literally, it was a completely made up story, said, Palmer is funding white supremacist internet trolls to attack Clinton supporters on the internet. It expanded from there. Palmer is funding anti-Semitic memes. Palmer is funding misogynist troll squads. Palmer is funding I believe Ars Technica called it a tidal wave of racist memes on Reddit, Facebook, and beyond. It was literally fabricated. None of it ever happened. It was a completely false story. And it was reported by dozens of outlets. CNN, Bloomberg, CNBC, Ars Technica, Wired Magazine, Gizmodo, Boing Boing, the Washington Post, Taylor Lorenz reported on it. I mean, it was everywhere. And they all just had this lockstep narrative. Palmer Luckey is a racist, misogynist, which is so funny. I'm actually a radical Zionist. And it was even in the moment, it was
What
funny.
is a radical Zionist?
I strongly believe in the right of Israel to exist as a Jewish state. Like people are like, that's so problematic though. It's so ethno-state adjacent. And I say, I don't care. After what happened to them in World War II, they deserve a place where they can do their own thing and protect their own people without getting wrecked by everybody else who hates them. And you know what? Maybe someday everyone who hates Jews are going to be gone. We are not living in that world today. And people, it's a slippery slope though. If they can have it, why can't the KKK have their own state? I say, that's not going to happen. It's absurd for us to even have this discussion. It is very reasonable for the Jews to have a place that is theirs. And they say, oh, but what about the Palestinians? You know what? That's a separate political issue. Like the existence of a Jewish state, which is what Zionism is, like the belief that they have the right to a Jewish state, the existence of a Jewish state, is separate from the issue of what do you do with refugees from some political, from some physical area. So it was so funny to me where like Palmer's this anti-Semitic guy, because it was literally made up. Like it's not even like there was like screenshots or made up screenshots. The journalists just said it was true with zero evidence, and they just repeated what each other said. And I know people are going to hear this and say, "This I must be missing." Palmer's he's glossing over something. He must have like said something about Jews on Twitter, and they were like,
"Are you Jewish?"
No, I'm not Jewish. I just believe in the existence of a Jewish state. And look, I bet even some of your listeners probably won't agree with me on that, and that's fine. We don't have to all agree on everything. But I will say it was pretty ridiculous in the moment where like Palmer's an anti-Semite. I'm like, no, I love the Jews more than like anybody. Like you Democrats would probably hate me for how much I like the Jews. Anyway, it was. But what happened was, as a result of this reporting, like looking back, I should have pushed back. What happened is I wrote a statement saying, hey, this is all false. None of this is true. Here's what actually happened. I gave $9,000 to this pro-Trump group. They ran a single billboard. Everyone is lying. This is literally fake news. And that was when fake news was like a new phrase. Facebook told me I couldn't publish it. They said, we won't let you make this statement. You cannot make this statement because it frames the media as the bad guy.
What a crazy place to work.
It really, well, and you know what was even crazier was that they maintained for years and years and years that I was not fired for my politics. Zuck got asked about it when he was in front of Congress. It was Ted Cruz who asked him, Senator Cruz, why did you fire Palmer Luckey? And he said, I don't think this is an appropriate forum. He said, you have to answer the question. And Zuck said something like, I can only commit that it was not it was not a political matter or something like that, which was, to be fair to Mark, I don't think he was lying. I think that his team had properly insulated him from it. Like when you're illegally firing employees for their politics, you don't bring that to the most important people in the company and basically poison them. Like that's poisoning the king. Like to show him, if you're like, hey king, here's this thing, we're performing illegal activity. Like you've just screwed them over now because now they do know. And now, am I to say that there was no suspicion or a kind of understanding as to what would happen? I wouldn't go that far, but it was crazy how they maintained for years and years and years that they literally their CTO Andrew Bosworth publicly on multiple occasions said Palmer's termination had nothing to do with politics. It was not a factor in any way whatsoever. And they were telling people, they started telling me that I was fired for cause. They're like, we can't tell you why he was fired, but believe me, we had no choice. He did something that was just beyond the pale. We had to fire him. We had no choice. I did, by the way, sort of get victory on this. So I will give credit to him. Andrew Bosworth, about a month ago, did post on Twitter. He said something like, you can pull up the exact one if you want and put it up on the screen. He said something like, I want to apologize to Palmer Luckey. I've been saying things about him in the past that weren't true. I just want people to know that I was misled by others and that we are sorry and it shouldn't have gone down that way and I was wrong. So they are actually finally acknowledging that the story they were putting out there, that politics was not a factor and that I was fired for any reason at all is nonsense. But it's sparse comfort a decade on.
Yeah. Wow. So you leave. I mean, are you involved with any VR now?
A little bit. We've got some big news coming soon. I have one more thing actually that's fun along those lines. I recently got the Meta Ray-Bans. Have you seen those? The little camera glasses. And it once it's all set up, it says, ask Meta about anything. Just say, okay, Meta, and then ask your question. Boop, boop. It's like, okay, Meta, when was Palmer Luckey fired? And it goes, boop, boop. Palmer Luckey was fired on March 29th, 2017, after being found guilty of stealing intellectual property in a trade secret lawsuit. And then it links to a story on ZDNet where the guy says I was found guilty of this crime, but he's literally wrong. It literally didn't happen. Because first of all, being found guilty is for criminal cases, not civil cases. Two, I literally won on all of the charges around trade secrets. Like we literally won on them. And the judge threw out all the damages against me and said, yeah, he's not guilty of any of this. So like, but what's crazy is of course, like the average person, like you ask these questions and these things that journalists write are being brought up years in the future as the basis for AI knowledge. And like if you ask these AI systems, as far as they know, it's all true. It's all true. So, according to these AIs, I was fired after I funded a tidal wave of anti-Semitic memes.
Jeez.
And it's just, and how do you undo that, right? It's like, it's this persistent harm that just lasts forever. Like, let's say that I could get them by sending my lawyers after them now to remove these stories. Well, there's still these huge AI models that have been trained on a decade now of reporting and re-reporting. How do you undo that? It's a big problem when you've got so much bullshit that's been put out there. A tidal wave of it. I'd say maybe the majority of it.
Well, I think the good news is I think the majority of people now know that legacy media is complete bullshit.
No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.